So part 2, top 10 worst cards. Just like before, there's going to be a couple honorable mentions. And then we're going to get into the worst cards. I really wanted to do them as one video, but it turned out it was too long. And me talking about these cards basically doubled the length of the video. So this should be a lot faster because a lot of these cards are really trash. This is going to be a fun video where we just trash a bunch of terrible cards. And just let you know how bad some of these really were. Let's get going. It's because it's in Dominion. And Dominion has way more removal and way better removal that they would never even consider running this card. But if this card was in another aspect, say Order, maybe Nature, like it would do something, right? It would do something because... Alright, so we're gonna cut a lot of these short. A lot of these Skill Shrine cards were buffed for the most part. They lowered the aspect cost and often the mana cost. This was the least bad of the bunch. And think on that when you look at this effect and say this is the least bad because it gets so much worse. So this card never saw any play because it's in Dominion. And why would you pay 3 mana to set up a removal of a single card? The card's terrible. Honorable mention, number 4. The Pegasus. So Pegasus makes it on the list because it's just a 1-mana 1/1 flyer and that's it. It has no synergy of any kind. It's like a Nightbringer that's not a demon, that doesn't mill. It's not a soldier, it's not a knight. It just does nothing. That's just a 1/1 flyer. It feels like a filler card, but this makes it on the list and not something like an Enchained Soul, because an Enchained Soul is a token you summon from something, which is why they added it as a card in the game. Nothing summons the Pegasus. Alright, so this card was obviously complete trash. Now there is something that summons this. The Pegasus Regiment, aka the Pony Brigade. And they actually did buff this to give it a unique effect where if you can like put this under a creature to give it like flying and 2 speed. So now it actually has identity and it does something. The card itself is still not playable, but it's now really serves as a token. And we may have cards in the future that summon more of these. So, yeah, cool stuff. One drop that does something better in every case. Moving on to honorable mention number 3. The Infused Subordinate. So this is the Dominion Subordinate. Every aspect got one. And this card is really bad because the starting stat line is kind of bad. It's like a Library Guards without the extra health. Yes, it can draw you a card, but you have to destroy a creature and pay 1 mana and be running Dominion. It's a lot of hoops to jump through for what's basically a worse Library Guards. This card is unbelievable trash. So yeah, it's basically a worse Library Guards. Think of this. This card's mana cost was reduced to 2. And the first effect now gives a Might Emblem. Well, you have to pay 1 mana, but you get a Might Emblem instead of just a temporary buff. So the card got a lot better, and it's still not played anywhere. So you can probably imagine our reaction when we saw this card. This card was like super garbage tier. And it's only an honorable mention. It's a lot of mana to play, and then when you use the energy, you only have maybe a 50-50 chance to actually get a card. And then maybe you'll get more energy if you attack with like 3 creatures. Yeah, it's just too much mana. I don't remember exactly what my suggestion was for this one. It's probably just make it cost 2 mana and make it look like... Alright, so this was supposed to be the card draw for Soldiers and Knights. It got buffed by a lot. Namely that you now look at top 3 instead of top 1. And instead of attacking with 3 or more creatures, you just have to deal damage to face. So, the card is still not played. I appreciate them trying to create like draw mechanisms for these decks, but this was like way terrible. This would have to start with like 6 energy to be even playable. The card was really bad. Yes, a legendary rage totem. Shamans are a real thing. And then we read the effect and we were not very impressed. The idea, I guess, is to give you an extra creature to attack with, but the problem is it has 1 speed, so it cannot attack anything, it cannot control the board, so it's doing something shamans don't need doing, and that's why it's bad. And my simple fix for this, just give it 2 speed. If it has 2 speed, it can actually control the board somewhat. Maybe even 3 energy? I don't know, but at the very least, give it 2 speed. Here, 1 speed creatures are not very good in this game, unless they are, I don't know, Ancient Trance or something. So that pretty much summarizes this card. It was absolutely awful because a 1 speed extra attacker did nothing. They did give it 2 speed, and they made it a 4/4 even. Now, they made it cost 3 aspects, but that's a fair compromise. It's a 4/4 with 2 speed. It's like a card you might run in Shamans. It's like not terrible, but not great. But this card was a mild joke, to be honest. It's kind of a 3 of a kind Cannonade, along with Earthquake, along with Snowstorm. So all 3 of these cards I'm placing kind of into the one category because they're basically the same card. It's a terrible board clear. And the reason they're so terrible is because they're letting your opponent decide what gets killed. What uses a removal spell that doesn't let you decide what you remove? I guess the idea is that, you know, you play it and then they have to distribute the damage on all their stuff. But that, it really doesn't work. Of the 3, I'd say Snowstorm is the worst of the bunch, so I'm gonna use it as the poster child, because for Snowstorm to do a lot of damage, your opponent has to have a lot of creatures. But if they have a lot of creatures, then they can distribute the damage better. And I've experimented with this card, and I was shocked at how terrible it is, because this card was unbelievably bad. They actually buffed it. The other cards are still the same, sadly, but maybe they'll get buffed. This card was buffed by doing 2 extra damage in addition to what it previously did. And it's still not played, although that's mostly because Mono Wisdom isn't the thing. The current version of Snowstorm is actually not bad. This version, though, absolute trash. Like, oh my god. Yeah, I can't even imagine. I don't know if they're gonna fix the board clears or they're gonna make them better. Because, like, you have Cataclysm, and all these other cards I just mentioned look like such crap compared to Cataclysm that, like, these board clears should be a little bit more on the same level. Whereas right now, Cataclysm is a good board clear, and the rest is crap. Well, they're not total crap, but they are very limited in what they can do. Snowstorm, actually, if it was a 1 aspect card, like 1 blue, 1 generic, would actually be an okay splash. Like an okay splash. Game, I was more and more shocked at how useless the card was. And after the 3rd, I just thought, this card is no chance. And this is only number 10! Oh yeah, it's getting there. So yeah, that's only number 10? Oh my god, what's ahead of this? Oh, this crap! Your opponent's gonna look at top 5 cards. If he hits a 4-cost card, you will have drawn 1 card for 4 mana, which is absolute trash. If he doesn't hit a 4-coster, you'll draw probably 2 cards of your opponent's choosing, which is not horrible, but it's a 2 mana more expensive Ancient Wisdom. Why aren't you just running Ancient Wisdom? So that's pretty bad, actually. If 4 mana, draw 2 is really bad. Really, really bad. Yeah, the card is really bad. They made it 3 mana now, and it's still not playable. It's basically a bad Ancient Wisdom. I'm not even sure this is playable at 2 mana, to be honest. I think at 2 mana it might be okay, because the idea is you want to send some stuff to the graveyard for, like, Reanimate. But your opponent gets to see what you get, and if they see a Reanimate among the cards, they would just send Reanimate to the graveyard, so I can kind of appreciate the idea that this is trying to go for, that Rage gets a lot of randomness, like now with the Burning Rage and Molten Passageway. But no, this, at 4 mana, it's like unbelievably bad. At 3 mana, it's still pretty bad. If Black Market cost 2 mana, yeah, maybe you run it. Maybe it's okay. Maybe. Like, I'd actually look at the card and think, yeah, maybe I could run. If you're looking for card draw, that might be okay. At 3 mana, which is what it is now, no es bueno. At 4 mana, it's laughable. Number 8, worst card in the expansion. The Ritual of Gardens, a card that looks really cool until you actually think about it. So let's see. You exhaust any number of fairies, and then you basically get to treat them as mana, disregarding aspect costs. Okay, and then the card replaces itself. The problem is this card itself costs 2 mana. So if you try to use, you play for 2 mana, you tap 2 fairies, and you get a 2-cost creature. You've done basically nothing except tap 2 of your fairies. So that's useless. And you had to have this in your hand. If you do it on a 3-coster, it's a little bit better, but you have to have 3 fairies and exhaust them all. The only use of this card is to get Elgoron on the board, where you tap 4 fairies and you get 4, you get Elgoron, maybe on turn like 5 or something, a lot earlier than you should. Seems good. You have to have 4 fairies on the board. And this card. It's it's not gonna happen. Like, this yeah, this card was actually buffed quite a bit so that A, you didn't have to exhaust them, and B, you could put any creature, not just nature. So one reason this card is bad is because there aren't really any creatures that are like, they cost way more aspects than mana. Like, if there was a creature in the game that cost 4 aspects and 2 mana, that'd be interesting because you could get it out on turn 3 or 4 very cheaply. But that's generally not the case. You can get a 3-aspect 2-mana card out, but it's like only 1 turn early and requires setup, and you can just run that card. It doesn't give nearly enough of a benefit. Now, the Elgoron thing is cute, but most of the fairies have like 1 HP. And honestly, you could just run Molten Passageway these days and achieve the same result without any shenanigans. The card has no chance of being played unless it's buffed. And even though it has been buffed, it's still bad. The effect isn't literally nothing. It's just, actually it kind of is. It does so little, it feels like a filler card. But this is actually my favorite card for the Great Rebuff. Alright, so there's not much you need to say about this card. It's shock a creature. Big deal. Now, this is now Power Discharge, which is a great card because it can either shock or freeze or do 1 damage, and all 3 of those are useful. Sometimes you do shock the creature, but you need to be able to also ping stuff and freeze stuff. So actually, this improvement is one of the best things the developers did, because they turned an absolutely god-awful card into a good card that is flexible and useful. Really well done. This card, I'm actually kind of shocked, appropriate for the name, that they designed this card, looked at this, and said, yeah, this is gonna see play. Like, are you serious? And I mean, okay, looking at some of the cards from the most OP list, you could probably think, okay, well, they clearly didn't playtest anything. But you don't have to playtest this to see that it's trash, right? Like, would you actually want to run a card that just shocks a creature? No, you would not. Because if you really want this effect, you just run Lightning Elemental, which is 3 mana, but it's also a 2/1/4 speed body. So, yeah. But you know what? I am really glad they changed it. Power Discharge is a wonderful card that has made the game better, that has given Wisdom a very useful tool. So well done, developers. This was one of your best changes ever. Kirsov Risha. Basically, it's on the list for the same reason as Shock. It's a redraw that does very little. It's actually worse than Shock because it has no immediate impact at all. At least Shock, like, absorbs some damage, technically, or it saves the creature. This will do, what, 3 damage over the course of the entire game? Maybe 4? That's it? What are you doing with your life playing this card? It's terrible. So this card has not been changed. As I did say, I mean, it's not a surprise that these are mostly correct, because it's much easier to see a bad card than a good one. The card, yeah, basically does nothing. Now, interestingly, I've seen some people draft this in, like, Limited. And I still cannot, for the life of me, figure out why. But no, all you need to know about this card is that it's trash. They didn't buff it, which is a shame. I'm hoping they do, because the card literally is useless. It fills a spot, and it does nothing. It's useless for every deck. And if you could make this into a cool spell, but it has to have a more powerful effect. They just, like, the enemy hero loses 1 life. Whoop-de-doo. Like, who cares? It's really bad. And it didn't get buffed, unlike the other one. Unlike Power Discharge. Flames. Yeah, what a badass card. Wait a minute. So, if I play this, on my turn, enemy creatures will take 1 more damage. So it's like a massive assault, but for only for 1 turn, and my creatures take damage too. Why don't I just run massive assault? Oh wait, maybe it's supposed to stop the enemy from attacking me. Well, I know a card like that, Angelic Song. You know, stops the enemy from attacking my creatures completely, and it even draws a card. And it sees no play. So this is a strictly worse version of a card that sees no play. It's truly terrible. Okay, so, oh, I talked about it a lot less than I thought. So, yeah, this one doesn't even draw a card. Now, the current version does draw a card, I think. Because, well, I mean, I say I think because who's ever played Wall of Flames? I don't even remember what these cards do. I just know they're absolutely terrible. So, yeah, I mean, you can look at this card and clearly see that it doesn't even stop the attacks. It'll stop the attacks of 1 health creatures, and that's it. Again, it's another one of those cards I just can't believe anybody would make this card and think this is good. And think this is gonna see any play. Like, I'm not kidding. This, it looks like you could just design this in your sleep. Like, I feel like a 5-year-old could design a better card. And no disrespect to the developers, but it's like, it's laughable. And the funny story with this card was, Boltor was the one who got raged as his aspect to reveal, and he accidentally did not get this card. So we thought, oh, 1 more cool rage card, and then we see Wall of Flames. Oh wait, it's complete trash. So we got hyped up for nothing. God damn it. No, the card now draws a card. It's not even close to playable. It would have to cost like 1 mana to be playable, and even that might not be enough. It's really bad. The card itself is Shooting Sprout, but we're gonna bring up Sprouting Totem because it's what summons them. Shooting Sprout is a 1 mana 0/1 with 1 speed. Literally the worst possible stats. It does nothing. I repeat, nothing on the board. It has a cool effect, but so what? You're going to play Ambush Strike on it? It's a 4/5 for 1 turn, and then it goes back to being a 0/1. Are you actually going to put this on the board? No, you are not. You are not. And Sprouting Totem, by extension, is really bad because it summons useless creatures. Yes, there's maybe some dream where you play this, like a bunch of Sprouting Totems, summon a bunch of Shooting Sprouts, and then play Totem of the Moon and give them a big buff. Yeah, it's never going to happen. Sorry. So that never actually happened. Shooting Sprout got buffed to have 2 speed, and it's still completely unplayable, but it's at least interesting. I wonder if they could make it a 1/1, but that is dangerous, because if it's a 1/1 and you buff it by 1, it becomes a 3/3, which is much better than a 2/3. So that would actually make it a strong card. If you play it and then buff it with Gurkha Tribe, for instance, then it would be a 3/3. That's actually terrifying, honestly. So maybe making it 1/1 is too good, but as a 0/1, it's just it's cute, but it's never gonna work. And because of that, Sprouting Totem is complete trash. Shooting Sprout, might as well read the discard a card. It's basically what it is. Number 3, worst card in the set, Ancient Ruins. Oh my god, it's just like the Dominion one, it's in the worst possible aspect it could be. If it wasn't in Wisdom, it would still be on the list, but probably a lot lower. But because it's in Wisdom, so think about this. Whenever you play a skill shrine, you are basically losing a card because a basic shrine would draw you a card. So you are investing a card to activate it. What is the effect of this card? Well, you draw a card for 2 mana. But you have to play a level 1 creature and have 2 mana left over. And if you do that, you have redrawn for 2 mana. So why not just play a basic shrine? So in order for you to start getting value, you have to then wait 2 more turns and spend 2 more mana and play a level 1 creature to finally draw a card. At best, you'll play a 1-drop and then pay 2 mana, so you'll have basically paid 3 mana to draw a card. Huh. So, by that very simple comparison, you could see why it was terrible. So this got buffed, actually. It's now only 1 aspect and 1 mana. And it's, like, slightly playable. It's not that bad. It can actually give you some amount of card draw. Being in Wisdom does suck because Wisdom does have card draw. I mean, you can always run Library Guards. You can always run Ancient Wisdom. And when you play this, you do lose the card. Ideally, you will redraw immediately, but it's better in Limited, where it can provide more consistent draw. In Constructed, I don't see it happening. Although I've seen some people run it, and it's not, like, terrible. Now that it's 1 mana, 1 aspect, it's actually, like, not terrible. But 1 aspect, like, blue creatures aren't that good. So now it's in, like, a meh category. Not terrible, not great. Well, mostly, definitely not great. Slightly terrible. Could it ever be good? It seems unlikely. I kind of wish this was in a different aspect. In a different aspect, it actually would be good. In it, with if 1 mana, 1 aspect cost, would be good. Anyways, let's continue with this clown fiesta. Fire God Temple. So you know how Ancient Ruins was laughably terrible? Well, this is basically the same thing, but somehow even worse. So you are giving up a card to do nothing, because you put a target emblem on something, which does nothing. Then next turn, you pay 2 more mana, and then you have to play a level 1 creature, and then you finally get to do 2 damage to the thing that you marked, assuming it isn't dead already. So, are you playing this with other target emblem stuff? All that stuff is mediocre at best. Even if you actually manage to mark something. Okay, so the dream with this card is to play the 3-drop. Where is he? Alright, Flame Rune Warrior. He enters the field, puts a target emblem or something, then you pay the 2 mana and you deal 2 damage to it. For 5 mana total. Well done! Except this card is pretty bad, and so is the other target emblem stuff. So, in order for this card to be at least decent, you have to play it in a really bad deck. If you play it in any other deck, it's basically 4 mana and a card. No, it's okay, so it's 4 mana to do 2 damage on your second turn. It has a cooldown of 1, yes, but you have to keep paying 2 mana, and you have to play level 1 creatures, and have 2 mana left over afterwards. If you can somehow actually kill a creature with this card, you probably deserve to win the game, because whatever combo wombo you did to pull that off probably should be game winning, honestly. So yeah, the target emblem stuff is just completely hopeless. Flame Rune Warrior is actually not that bad, and maybe the only good one. The only good target emblem card. But this is now 1 mana, I believe, and 1 aspect, I think. Again, I don't even remember, because nobody runs this. The effect is simply too weak. These shrines have to have a more significant effect because you are investing a card. And because the target emblem archetype is bad, this is just super bad. And even if the archetype was good, I don't even think it's worth running this, because, yeah, it's pretty mild. I think if it costs 0 mana to activate, might be interesting, actually. But as it is, I mean, when I saw this card, I just thought, wow, like, you know, Wall of Fire is just clearly awful. This is like it's a complicated card that's just super bad. That's basically all I can think of when I look at it. Whoa, I got a hiccup from how bad this card is. Oh my goodness. And it's still terrible, even after the buff. So yeah, let's just move on to the worst card, which you may have already guessed. Maybe not if you didn't know about the patch. But oh, you're gonna laugh. Must have guessed by now because it's the only awful card I have not named yet. Soul Projection. You know how just a moment ago I was absolutely trashing these distribute cards, like those board clears that don't do anything? Welcome to a board clear, similar to Snowstorm, let's say, that basically reads, discard a card and destroy a friendly creature. So, in order for this to have a similar effect as, let's say, Arrow Barrage. Okay, let's just compare to Arrow Barrage, right? Arrow Barrage is a 3-drop. This is a 3-drop. Arrow Barrage does 4 damage to one of the rows. For this to have a similar effect, you have to sack a 4-attack creature. You're not going to have one by turn 3, by the way. And then you get to play Arrow Barrage, except your opponent gets to choose the distribution completely. So you can't play it on turn 3 unless you sack a 1-drop or something, which will do 1 damage. Oh, hooray. So let's say you sack an Antriel late game. Oh yeah, you sacrifice an Antriel, you play this card, and you distribute 6 damage, and maybe you'll kill something. So at best case scenario, you'll 2-for-1 yourself and lose a valuable card. Worst case scenario, again, this card reads, discard a card and destroy a friendly creature. Okay, that's quite enough. I'm being reminded of Peacekeeper absolutely trashing this card in the podcast. I mean, he was just visibly upset about it. And I mean, obviously, now the current version does double the damage. So if you sack a 4-attack, it'll do 8. That's considerably better. Obviously, with a double, Soul Projection is actually an interesting card. But it's still not, like, great. And it's not even played in Constructed. So you can imagine just how awful it is. Now, comparing it to Arrow Barrage was bad. It would be better compared to, like, Cannonade. And, yeah, it would be a cheaper Cannonade, but you have to sack a 4-attack creature. Because if you sack a 2-attack creature and they distribute 2 damage, that's terrible, right? So, yeah, there's absolutely no way to play this. You needed to way more damage. My original suggestion was to make it deal damage to all creatures, kind of like Shadow Flame from Hearthstone. Then you would make it more expensive. The compromise of having it deal double damage, yeah, that helped a lot. With a double damage projection, it became an interesting card. So yeah, they doubled the effect of the card, and it was only decent. I mean, that should give you an idea of just how unbelievably awful it was. Interestingly, the developers admitted that they actually made a mistake with this card. They intended it to do double damage from the start, but there was like an oversight or a coding error or something, and it only dealt like 1 times the damage. And they saw, oh wow, that makes the card completely terrible. And yeah, that's exactly what it was. So I'm glad they fixed this. Soul Projection is actually a decent board clear. Like, it's alright. If you can distribute like 6 or 8 damage, especially if you can get some buffs going with like Namir, the card could be decent. But right now, priests don't really have room for this, because priests aren't interested in removing cards. They're more interested in just killing you with like Hermelian Hero Power. But because it is splashable, maybe once the meta shifts, maybe once the balance patch comes through, Soul Projection could definitely find its way into something like a deck with like soldiers that you like to buff that Knight Recruiter to be really big. Could use Soul Projection. I actually played this card in a Kayanu deck with Tren, because when you Kayanu Tren, he would come out as a 5/5, and then when you projection him, it dealt 10 damage to their board, and it would just totally wipe them out. Yeah, and the card currently is like decent, certainly decent. Really good that they buffed it, because it was really sad. It made Order players really sad, because it's like Dominion got a bunch of overpowered cards and Order got a bunch of trash. Well, except like Gomer, I guess, and Descendant of Divinity was okay, but the rest was mostly trash. So yeah, that concludes the list. Yeah, some cards got changed, some didn't. Maybe they can come back to these cards that they didn't deal with before. I do hope that and eventually they do a big buff patch to just bring some of these really useless cards to be a little bit better. So even if they aren't constructed viable, they're at least like not bad. And if you want to build like a fun deck or a casual deck, you have like decent options. Because I think that's what we're lacking right now in Spellweaver. It's very hard to construct a decent like casual deck because like there's like few really insane cards right now that are driving these decks, and anything else just falls flat. And I want to see more of these cool decks. So yeah, we'll see what happens in the future. The patch is only a few days away. No, it's 3 days from the recording of this video, so it might be less by the time you see it. Anyways, looking forward to it. I'm of course gonna review the patch. I'm sure Laurentio will as well. I'll see you then. I hope you enjoyed. I definitely enjoyed this trip down memory lane to see just the kind of trash that the expansion created. But I guess that's the risk when you release that many cards. It's inevitable that some will be awful. I mean, if you just look at the history of Hearthstone's expansions, like on average for every 120 cards they release, there's like what, 90 terrible ones at least. So yeah, I mean, maybe this wasn't even that bad by that standard, that there weren't that many bad cards, and after they buffed them, there weren't that many at all. So keep it up, developers. I'll see you guys next time.